A cold night, a warm invite. The wind outside howled like a wild animal. Snowflakes danced in the air, covering the trees and ground in white. It was a cold night, the kind that made people stay inside with hot drinks and warm blankets. But Tom wasn't like most people. He lived alone in a small wooden cabin deep in the forest. The closest town was 30 minutes away. Tom liked it that way. After his wife passed away 2 years ago, silence became his only friend. Tom sat by the fireplace, sipping tea and reading an old book. The fire crackled softly, casting warm light across the room. It was peaceful. Suddenly, a strange sound broke the silence. Thud, thud, crash. Tom looked up. It didn't sound like an animal. Too heavy, too fast. Something, or someone, was outside. He stood up slowly, grabbed his flashlight, and walked toward the door. When he opened it, a gust of freezing wind hit his face. The night was dark, and the snow was falling harder now. Then he saw her. A figure collapsed on the edge of the trees. She was lying in the snow, not moving. Her skin seemed to glow slightly, almost like soft blue light under her skin. Her clothes were strange, shiny and torn, nothing like anything Tom had ever seen. He rushed toward her without thinking. "Hey, are you okay?" he called out. She didn't answer. Her eyes were open but weak. She looked at him, her eyes full of fear and confusion. Tom knelt beside her. She was cold, freezing cold, but still breathing. "I'll get you inside," he said softly. He picked her up in his arms. She was lighter than he expected, like her bones were hollow. Her skin felt smooth but not human. She didn't resist. Back inside the cabin, Tom placed her near the fireplace and covered her with a thick blanket. He made hot soup and brought a towel to dry her silver-colored hair. She sat up slowly, looking around with wide eyes, as if everything was strange to her. "You're safe now," Tom said gently. "I don't know who you are or where you came from, but I won't hurt you." She didn't speak. She just looked at him, then at the soup. Slowly, she reached out and took the bowl. She drank it like she hadn't eaten in days. Tom smiled. "You like it? It's just vegetable soup, nothing fancy." She gave a small nod. Still no words. Tom noticed something glowing under her coat, a small round device with blinking lights. She quickly pushed it back inside before he could get a good look. He didn't ask questions. Not yet. After she finished eating, she looked at him again. Her eyes were a strange color, silver with little sparks inside. Beautiful, but otherworldly. Finally, she spoke one word. "Zarina." Her voice was soft, almost musical. "Is that your name?" Tom asked. She nodded once, then leaned back against the chair, exhausted. Tom sat across from her. "I'm Tom. I live here. You can stay until you're okay." She gave him a tired look, like she didn't understand everything, but she trusted him. For now. Outside, the wind grew stronger. The storm was getting worse. Tom added more wood to the fire and yawned. "Long day," he said. "You should rest. I'll be right here." As Zarina closed her eyes, Tom noticed something strange. Her skin, under the firelight, began to glow softly. Not like a reflection, more like it came from inside her. And her hand moved slightly in the air, like she was controlling something invisible. Then he heard it. A faint sound, like a signal being sent into the sky. It came from the small device under her coat. A blue light shot upward through the roof like a beam, but only for a second. Then it was gone. Tom blinked. What the hell was that? Zarina didn't answer. She was already asleep. Her chest rose and fell gently. She looked peaceful, like a tired child. But outside, far above the clouds, something responded. A ship, hidden in orbit, received the signal. Its red lights turned on. Something was coming. And Tom had no idea that the woman he had just invited in was not just from another world. She was royalty. Who is she? The truth begins to unfold, but so does danger. The morning sunlight broke through the forest trees and touched the snow-covered ground. A golden glow spread across the cabin walls as Tom slowly opened his eyes. He had fallen asleep in the chair next to the fire. His back ached, and his tea had gone cold. Then he remembered. He turned his head quickly. Zarina. She was still there, lying on the small couch, wrapped in a thick blanket. Her silver hair had fallen across her face. Her skin no longer glowed like last night, but it still held a strange shine, like moonlight trapped under her skin. She looked peaceful now, but Tom's mind was full of questions. Who was she? Where did she come from? What was that blue beam last night? He stood up slowly and walked into the kitchen, trying not to wake her. He made fresh tea and heated some bread. The warmth filled the cabin, and soon Zarina stirred. She opened her eyes and sat up slowly, her silver gaze meeting his. "Morning," Tom said gently, holding out a cup of tea. "You probably need this more than I do." Zarina looked at the cup, then at him. She seemed unsure, as if still deciding whether to trust him. Finally, she took the cup with both hands and nodded once. Her fingers were thin, almost delicate, but her movements were sharp, like a soldier trained to stay alert. Tom watched her silently for a few moments, then spoke. "Are you feeling better?" Zarina nodded again, sipping the tea carefully. "I saw what you did last night," he said quietly. "The light, the signal. That wasn't from Earth, was it?" She froze. Her hands tightened around the cup. "I'm not here to hurt you," Tom added quickly. "But I think you already know that." Zarina placed the cup on the table and stood up. She looked at him with guarded eyes, then walked to the window. She stared out into the snowy forest for a long time. Then she spoke. "I didn't mean to come here." Her voice was soft, but it carried weight. It sounded like someone used to giving orders, not explanations. "I was running. My ship was damaged. I crashed," she continued. "Earth was not the destination. It was an accident." Tom listened carefully. Running from what? Zarina turned to face him. For the first time, he saw the pain behind her strong eyes. "My own people." She walked to the corner of the room and pulled something out from under her coat, a small silver device, round and smooth, with glowing blue symbols. "This is a beacon," she explained. "It called for help, but it may have also told others where I am." Tom felt a chill, and not from the weather. "Others? You mean the ones chasing you?" Zarina nodded. "They want me dead." She sat down again, clearly exhausted. "I wasn't supposed to survive, but I did. And now, I need to stay hidden until help comes." Tom's mind raced. It was one thing to help a stranger in need, another to realize she was part of some alien war, hunted by beings he couldn't even imagine. And yet, he didn't feel fear. He felt something else, something stronger. He felt responsible. "You can stay here," he said finally. "As long as you need." Zarina looked surprised. "You're not afraid?" "I've seen worse," he said quietly. "I was in the army once, lost a lot. Then I lost my wife. Fear stopped scaring me after that." Zarina didn't smile, but her eyes softened. "I don't want to bring danger to your home," she said. "Then we'll be careful," Tom replied. "But I'm not letting someone freeze to death in my woods, alien or not." They shared a long silence. Then suddenly, Zarina stood up straight. Her body tensed. Her ears, longer and more pointed than Tom first noticed, twitched slightly. "What is it?" Tom asked. Zarina didn't answer. She walked to the door, opened it just a crack, and peered outside. The forest was quiet. Too quiet. Then, in the distance, a soft buzzing sound echoed through the trees. Zarina's voice dropped to a whisper. "They're here." Tom stepped beside her. "What do you mean?" "Who?" They found me, she said. That signal last night. It was not only received by friends. Tom could now hear the buzzing too, like a swarm of insects, low and strange. What do we do? He asked. Zarina closed the door and backed away from the window. We prepare, she said, because this time they will not just be looking. Tom glanced at the shotgun hanging above the fireplace. He hadn't used it in years, but something told him he might need it tonight. Outside, far beyond the trees, 3 shapes moved silently through the snow. They weren't human, and they were getting closer. The hunters. Not every visitor from the stars comes in peace. Snow fell silently over the forest like a thick blanket, but something dark moved beneath the white stillness, silent, fast, and wrong. Inside the small cabin, Tom and Zarina sat close to the fireplace, but their minds were far from peace. The quiet hum in the distance had grown louder over the past hour. It was steady, almost like a heartbeat, but not from anything human. Zarina stood by the window, her eyes glowing faintly once again. She no longer looked like a lost traveler. She looked alert, calculating, ready. They're not far now, she said quietly. Tom adjusted the old shotgun hanging above the fireplace. He hadn't touched it in years. He hoped he wouldn't have to use it now, but he also wasn't a fool. Who exactly are they? He asked. More like you. Zarina's eyes narrowed. No, they're worse. She sat down at the table and took out her glowing silver device again. Tom noticed it had changed. Now it showed small red dots blinking on its surface, moving slowly toward the center. Toward them. They're called Draxian warders, Zarina explained. Elite soldiers from my world. They once protected the royal family, until they turned against us. Against me. Tom frowned. Why? Zarina looked into the fire. Because power makes some men greedy. I was next in line to rule. They didn't want that. They wanted control. I refused. They tried to kill me. I escaped. Barely. Tom didn't know what to say. He was a simple man, a builder, a veteran, a widower. He'd never imagined he'd be sheltering an alien princess at war with her own people. And now, that war had come to his doorstep. Are they like you? He asked again. Same powers. Zarina shook her head. No, stronger in body, weaker in mind. They follow orders like machines, but they don't care who gets in their way. Tom's grip on the shotgun tightened. Then they'll have a problem with me. Zarina tilted her head slightly. You would risk your life for someone like me. Tom didn't hesitate. You needed help. That was enough. Zarina looked away for a moment, her voice softer. No one's ever said that to me before. Before Tom could answer, a loud crack echoed through the forest, like a tree snapping under pressure. Zarina froze. They're here. Tom moved quickly. He turned off the lights, shut the curtains, and grabbed a lantern. The cabin filled with warm, flickering light, casting deep shadows across the room. He handed Zarina a blanket. Wrap yourself in this. If they look through the window, they'll just see another human. Zarina obeyed without question. Tom looked out the side window, barely pulling the curtain. At first, he saw nothing. Then, movement. 3 tall, thin shapes in black armor walked slowly through the snow. Their eyes glowed red like burning coals. Their arms were long and sharp-looking, with what looked like weapons built into them. They weren't walking toward the cabin directly. They were circling. They're scanning for life forms. Zarina whispered. They can sense energy, warmth, movement. Tom cursed under his breath. They're hunting. Exactly, she replied. They're not here to talk. Suddenly, one of the shapes turned its head. The red eyes stared directly at the cabin. Tom pulled away from the window, heart pounding. They saw us. Zarina stood. Then we don't run. We stand. She touched the glowing device on her wrist, and a soft shimmer surrounded her. Her body became outlined in golden light. It looked like armor forming from nothing. pure energy. Tom stepped back, shocked. "What is that?" "My inheritance," she said. "Royal battle skin. Only the royal bloodline can use it." Outside, one of the creatures let out a terrible screech. The windows shook. Birds flew from the trees in panic. A second later, the front door rattled violently. Boom. Boom. Tom raised the shotgun. "Stay behind me." Zarina didn't move. "No, this is my fight." The doors smashed open. The first Draxian charged in, taller than any human, its face covered in black metal. It raised a glowing weapon, but Zarina moved first. She raised her hand, and a wave of blue energy shot forward, hitting the creature straight in the chest. It flew backward out the door and into the snow. Tom stared in shock. What was that? Zarina didn't answer. The second creature jumped through the broken window, landing beside Tom. Before it could strike, Tom fired. The shotgun roared, and the creature staggered back, but didn't fall. Zarina spun and launched another wave of light. This one hit the creature's leg, and it collapsed. But the third one was still outside, and it was different. It stood at the edge of the trees, taller, heavier, its body covered in red lines that pulsed like blood. Zarina's face grew pale. That's their leader. Tom reloaded quickly. Can you take him? Zarina shook her head. Not alone. Tom stepped beside her. Then you're not alone. Together, they stood in the ruined cabin, ready to face the enemy. And outside, the hunter raised its weapon and spoke in a voice that shook the trees. Return the queen, or burn with her. Forest of Secrets. Sometimes the only way forward is through the dark. The cabin burned behind them. Smoke rose into the cold night sky as Tom and Zarina ran into the forest, their breath visible in the freezing air. Snow crunched beneath their boots, and the trees grew thicker with each step. Behind them, the hunters searched through the wreckage of the cabin. The leader, the tall one with red lines glowing under its black armor, did not rush. It moved slowly, scanning the ground, sniffing the air like a predator that already knew its prey couldn't run far. Zarina moved quickly through the forest, despite her injuries. Her energy armor had faded, the glow around her dim now. Her body trembled, not from cold, but from exhaustion. Tom kept up, holding the shotgun tightly. His mind raced. His home was gone. Everything he owned, everything he built after his wife's death. It had turned to ash in minutes. And yet he didn't stop running, because the person beside him wasn't just another stranger anymore. She was a queen. Where are we going? He asked, panting. There's a cave, Zarina said. About 1 mile from here. I saw it on my scanner yesterday. It's old. Deep. They can't track us if we hide underground. Tom nodded, trusting her. Let's move. The forest seemed alive with shadows. Every tree looked like a figure. Every sound, a threat. But they kept going. After 30 more minutes of silent running, they finally reached it. A narrow crack between 2 giant rocks opened into darkness. The entrance was hidden behind snow-covered branches. Unless someone knew exactly where to look, they'd walk right past it. Zarina pushed inside first. Tom followed, ducking under low stones. The air grew colder and damp. Their boots splashed through puddles as the path curved deeper underground. They stopped in a small stone chamber, just big enough for 2 people to sit. Zarina collapsed against the wall, breathing hard. Tom lit a small flare from his backpack. A red glow filled the cave. It wasn't much, but it gave warmth and light. Tom knelt beside her. Are you okay? Zarina closed her eyes for a moment, then nodded. I used too much power. My body. It needs time. Tom handed her water. You saved my life. Twice. She looked at him. You saved mine first. They sat in silence for a while, listening to the sound of dripping water echo through the cave. Then Tom asked softly, Why do they want you dead so badly? You're a queen, right? Doesn't that mean you're supposed to rule? Zarina looked down, her voice quiet. Yes. I was born as the next heir to the throne of Serethis, a planet far from here. My mother was queen, a peaceful ruler. She believed in science, in unity with other worlds. But many in the royal court did not agree. Tom listened carefully. They wanted war, she continued. They believed Serethis should conquer, not share. When my mother refused to use our army for power, they turned against her. The Draxian Guard, our most loyal protectors, were the first to betray her. She paused, her hands trembling slightly. They killed her in front of me. Tom's breath caught in his throat. I escaped through a secret corridor my mother had built long ago. A small ship waited. I didn't know where to go. I just flew. The ship took damage during the chase. I crash-landed on Earth. Her voice cracked. I didn't expect to survive the landing. And I never expected someone like you. Tom swallowed hard. I'm sorry you went through all that. Serena looked at him, her eyes wet but steady. You didn't ask for this. I brought danger to your life. Tom shook his head. I brought you into my cabin. I'd do it again. Suddenly, Zarina's device lit up faintly. A soft tone played. She grabbed it quickly, scanning the display. What is it? Tom asked. It's a message, she said, from one of the last loyal guards. He received my signal. He's alive. Tom leaned in. What does it say? Zarina read aloud. Zeta protocol confirmed. Extraction possible at designated point. 6 hours from now. That's good, right? Tom asked. Zarina nodded slowly. Yes, but we have to reach the extraction point. Where is it? She showed him the map on the device. The location was marked deep inside the forest, past the river, and near the mountains. Tom frowned. That's miles from here. And those things out there, they're still hunting us. Zarina stood, a little stronger now. Then we move when the moon is highest. They rest during deep night, to recharge their systems. Tom nodded. We'll make it. But just then, a strange hissing noise echoed through the cave. Tom raised the shotgun. From the shadows of the tunnel behind them, 2 glowing red dots appeared. Eyes. One of the hunters had found them. Zarina's body flared with golden light again, weak but rising. No more hiding, she whispered. Tom raised his gun. Then let's finish this. The forest above was quiet. But down below, the real battle was just beginning. Trust and fire. Trust is a risk, but sometimes it's the only thing that can save you. The cave shook with a deep rumble. Red eyes glowed in the dark. The hunter had found them. Tom stood in front of Zarina, his hands firm on the shotgun. He felt his heart pounding in his chest. Every part of his body told him to run. But he didn't. Not this time. Not while she was still behind him. The Draxian hunter stepped forward from the tunnel shadows. It was smaller than the leader but still tall, its armor covered in black metal, its movements fast and smooth. It hissed like a snake, and its arm turned into a glowing blade. Tom fired. The shotgun blast echoed in the cave. The creature staggered backward, but it didn't fall. It let out a sharp scream, then charged. Before it reached Tom, Zarina raised her hand. A burst of golden energy exploded from her palm. It struck the creature in the chest, throwing it across the stone wall. Sparks flew. The hunter twitched and collapsed, its armor smoking. Silence returned. Tom looked at her, amazed. That was stronger than before. Zarina's hands shook. I used more than I should have. You saved us. I also warned them where we are, she whispered. They'll come. All of them. Tom reloaded his shotgun. Then we leave now. Zarina tried to stand but stumbled. Tom caught her before she fell. You're weak, he said. You need rest. No time, she replied. We have to trust each other now, or we die. Tom helped her walk out of the cave and into the forest again. The sky above had darkened more. The moon was high, and the snow glowed faintly under its light. Every sound felt sharper, every shadow more dangerous. They moved fast, heading toward the extraction point Serena had marked on her device. But each step grew heavier. Tom's muscles ached. His hands were cold, and Serena's strength was fading. They stopped near a frozen river. The sound of water rushing under the ice was loud. Tom turned to her. "Tell me the truth. Can you even make it to the drop point?" Serena looked at him with tired eyes. "I don't know." Tom removed his jacket and put it around her shoulders. "Then we go together. If you fall, I carry you." Serena hesitated. "You don't have to do this." Tom looked into her eyes. "Yes, I do." A strange silence passed between them, warm and full of something unspoken. She reached out and gently touched his hand. "I've never trusted anyone before," she said. "Not fully, but I trust you, Tom." Tom nodded. "Good, because we don't have anyone else." Suddenly, the air changed. A low hum began to rise. Snow on the ground lifted slightly, like it was floating. Serena's face turned pale. "They're above us." Tom looked up. From behind the trees, 3 more Draxian hunters appeared. They didn't walk this time. They hovered, their bodies surrounded by red energy. Their eyes locked onto Serena. The leader stepped forward. His voice boomed like thunder. "You run. You hide. But royalty cannot escape the crown of fire." Tom raised his gun. "I don't care who you are. You're not touching her." The hunter ignored him. "You protect her." "Foolish. You will burn beside her." Serena stepped forward, holding herself tall, even though her legs shook. "I am Serena of House Altheron," she said loudly, "daughter of Queen Valera. And I do not run anymore." The hunters moved to attack. Then something strange happened. Serena closed her eyes and took a deep breath. A wind began to blow, not from the sky, but from her. A soft golden light rose around her body like fire. It grew brighter, stronger. Her feet lifted slightly off the ground. "Tom," she said calmly, "close your eyes." He did. Then a blast of golden fire exploded outward. The sound was deafening. The forest shook. Trees bent from the force. The snow melted in a wide circle. When Tom opened his eyes, 2 hunters were down, their bodies smoking and still. Only the leader remained, his armor cracked. Serena fell to her knees. "It's done. I can't fight anymore." Tom stepped forward, gun ready. The leader growled. "You will not win, human." Tom fired point blank. This time, the hunter fell. Smoke curled into the sky. The forest was silent again. Serena lay on the ground, breathing hard. Tom rushed to her side. "I'm here," he said softly. "It's okay." She opened her eyes, weak but smiling. "You fought like one of us," she whispered. Tom held her hand. "And you burned like a star." Far in the distance, a low hum filled the sky. A new ship was approaching, sleek, silver, and glowing blue. Help had arrived. But Tom wasn't thinking about that now. He looked at Serena, her eyes, her strength, her kindness, and he realized something. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about something deeper, something stronger, something worth fighting for. A message across stars. Every goodbye carries a question. Will I ever see you again? The hum grew louder. Tom looked up into the night sky, eyes wide. Through the thick trees, a shape appeared, glowing silver, smooth like a drop of light in the sky. It moved with grace, slower than any aircraft Tom had ever seen. Serena opened her eyes weakly. "They came," she whispered. The ship began to lower, branches bending under its silent energy. Blue lights shimmered beneath its surface like ripples in water. It was beautiful, unreal. A section on the side of the ship opened with a hiss, and a ramp slowly extended toward the forest floor. From within the ship, 4 figures emerged. They wore long cloaks and silver armor that sparkled under the moonlight. Their faces were like Serena's, elegant, with soft, glowing skin and shining silver eyes. They moved fast but gently, forming a protective circle around her. Tom stepped back as two of them knelt beside her. "Princess," one said in a deep voice, "we received your signal. We feared the worst." Serena coughed slightly but managed a smile. "I am alive, thanks to him." She looked at Tom. The guards turned to him and bowed slightly, not as a king, but with deep respect. "You protected our hair with your life," one said. "For that, we are in your debt." Tom felt awkward. "I just did what anyone with a heart would do." "Few have that kind of heart," the guard replied. One of them placed a glowing crystal over Serena's chest. A soft light pulsed. Her body relaxed. Some of the pain left her face. Tom helped her stand slowly. She leaned on him, still weak. Then a strange quiet filled the air. Serena looked up at the ship, then back at Tom. Her eyes were soft. "Sad. I must go," she said. "They'll come again. And next time, Earth may not be safe." Tom nodded, his voice low. "You're right. You can't stay here. Not like this." But he didn't hide the pain in his eyes. Serena looked at the forest around them, the place she nearly died, the place she was saved. Then she looked at him. "I want to show you something," she said. She took the small silver device from her belt and tapped it twice. A new image floated in the air. Holographic stars, distant galaxies, and one small glowing mark. "That is Serathis," she said. "My home. My people still suffer under those who betrayed me." Tom stared at the image. "You're going back, to fight." Serena nodded. "To take back what is mine, but not just the throne. I want to rebuild it, the right way." Her eyes burned with quiet fire. "The way my mother dreamed." Tom smiled. "She would be proud of you." Serena reached into her pocket and pulled out a tiny blue crystal. She placed it in his hand. It was warm, and it pulsed with light. "If you ever need me," she said, "press this. I will come, no matter where I am." Tom looked at the crystal, then at her. "You'd cross galaxies, for me." Serena's voice softened. "You gave me hope, in the darkest place. That is worth more than a kingdom." Their eyes met. The world around them disappeared. Then one of the guards stepped forward. "Princess, time is short. The window to return is closing." Serena nodded, her voice low. "I know." She turned back to Tom. "I will return, if I survive." Tom took her hand. "You're not just going to survive. You're going to lead." Serena smiled. For the first time, it wasn't guarded or royal. It was real. She stepped onto the ramp, her figure lit by the soft blue light. As she reached the top, she looked back one last time. "Goodbye, Tom of Earth." Tom lifted the crystal in his hand. "Goodbye, Serena of Serathis." The ship rose into the sky, silent and bright. Tom stood alone in the quiet forest, the snow glowing gently around him. But he didn't feel alone. He felt something deep inside, something stronger than fear, louder than pain. Hope. A message had been sent across the stars. Not just a call for help, but a promise. That kindness still mattered. That even one human could change the future of another world. The royal farewell. Even across galaxies, some goodbyes don't last forever. 3 months had passed. The forest was peaceful again. Snow had melted. Flowers were blooming along the edges of the path where the fire once burned. The cabin was gone, just a patch of scorched earth now, surrounded by new grass and the scent of pine. Tom stood at the edge of the clearing, holding a toolbox in one hand and a worn backpack in the other. He had started building again, not just walls, but a life. His new cabin was smaller, simpler, but it felt right. He wasn't trying to replace what he had lost. He was honoring it. The past still lived in his heart, but the future now whispered to him, gently, like the wind in the trees. Every night, he looked up at the stars. Every night, he wondered if she was still alive. If she had made it. If Zarina had taken back her throne. The crystal she gave him sat on the shelf near his bed. It still pulsed with soft blue light, like a heartbeat across space. He hadn't touched it since the night she left. Until today. Tom picked it up and stared at it. The light inside was steady, waiting. He sat down on the small wooden steps of his new porch and held it close. He wasn't sure why, but something in his chest told him today was different. The wind changed. The birds fell silent. Then, without warning, the crystal warmed in his hand. The light inside flared bright. A soft hum began to fill the air, quiet at first, then growing louder. Tom stood up quickly, his heart pounding. A beam of silver light shot down from the sky, straight into the clearing. It shimmered, spun, and then took shape. A figure appeared, cloaked in gold, her silver hair flowing in the wind, eyes glowing like stars. Zarina. She stepped forward, her armor gone, wearing a long, deep blue robe with symbols Tom didn't understand. But her smile, he understood that completely. She looked stronger, wiser, and peaceful. Tom could hardly speak. "You're alive." She nodded. "I promised I would return." Tom laughed, half in joy, half in disbelief. "I didn't think you meant this soon." "I came as soon as the war ended," she said softly. "The battle was long. Many were lost. But we took back the throne. Serethis is healing." He looked at her, amazed. "You did it." "No," she said, stepping closer. "We did." Tom felt a strange tightness in his chest. "You didn't forget." Zarina smiled. "How could I forget the man who gave me hope when I had nothing left?" They sat on the steps together, just like old friends. But the silence between them was no longer filled with pain. It was filled with something warm, something true. Zarina looked at the new cabin. "You built again." "I had to," Tom said. "Couldn't let the past take everything." "You are stronger than most I'd ever known," she whispered. Tom shrugged. "I just made soup for a stranger. You gave a future to a queen." They sat in silence for a moment, watching the wind move through the trees. Then Tom turned to her. "What happens now? Will you stay?" Zarina looked at the sky. "I can't. Not yet. My people need me. The world I returned to is still broken." Tom nodded. He understood. But it still hurt. Zarina saw it in his eyes. She touched his hand gently. "But this time," she said, "you won't be alone." She reached into her robe and pulled out a new crystal, twice the size of the last one, glowing silver. "This is not just a signal," she said. "It is a doorway. If you ever wish to come to Serethis, this will take you there." Tom stared at it. "You want me to come to your world?" "Not as a visitor," she said softly. "As a friend, as someone they must know." Tom laughed. "I'm just a guy who lives in the woods." Zarina tilted her head. "To me, you're the man who changed everything." A distant hum filled the air again. Her ship was returning. Zarina stood slowly. Tom stood with her. "No goodbye this time," she said. "No," Tom replied. "Only, see you again." She smiled, then leaned forward and kissed his cheek, softly, gently, like a promise. Then she stepped back into the silver beam and vanished. Tom stood alone once more. But it didn't feel like an ending. It felt like a beginning. He looked down at the new crystal in his hand. The stars above him shimmered. And somewhere far across the galaxy, a throne had been reclaimed, a people restored, and a queen remembered a man who gave her warmth on the coldest night.